These are 5 novellas that I will always recommend. Now, I'm not entirely sure if these are actually like classified as novellas. They could be short stories or just smaller books, but they're all short books, and so they're going to be on my list. So the first one is The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, the classic novel originally published in 1895. Now in this story, the main character, who's only referred to as the time traveler, invents a time machine and travels to the year 802,700. Well, in that year, he finds out that humanity has kind of devolved into 2 separate races. The gentle and carefree Eloi, which I hope I'm saying that right, but they kind of live on the surface and they don't really have any worries and they just go around and they're happy and they're just in a good mood all the time. And then the pale and the dangerous Morlocks, who have been underground for who knows how many years, and they are basically the working class. They develop everything and they make everything, and they've been underground for so long that they are pale and they've kind of devolved into basically just angry, hungry beings. After a short exploration, the time traveler realizes that his time machine has been stolen and is missing, and he gets stuck in between these 2 races and fighting for his life as he is trying to find that time machine again so he can get back to his own time. I read this book because it seemed kind of interesting and I'd heard a lot about it, but I'd never read it before, and when I finally picked it up, I finished it in one night. It was like 3 in the morning and I couldn't sleep, and I just read the whole thing because I was so sucked in, and the Morlocks were actually completely terrifying. If you're a fan of classic sci-fi, you should absolutely give this one a try. Next, we have Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, book 1 in the Monk and Robot series. It has 2 books in the duology. The second book is The Prayer for the Crown Shy, and these are just the perfect, cozy, solar punk, just feel-good books. So a few hundred years before the events of this book, humanity invented robots to kind of do the menial jobs or whatever, and something happened, they don't know exactly what, but all of the robots gained sentience. Then they were able to learn and to grow for themselves, and they were kind of individual sentient human beings. And these robots decided that they were man-made, all they'd ever known was man-made, and they wanted to go out into the wilderness, and they wanted to experience what had been nature-made. So the humanity decided, yeah, that's fine. They let them go into the wilderness to experience the things that they wanted to experience without feeling like they owned them or anything like that. And they decided that the robots would be the first to come back to contact them when they felt ready. The humans wouldn't go out and seek out the robots. And so nobody has even seen a robot in a very long time. The story starts with Dex. They're a monk who just kind of starts to feel unsatisfied with life. They've lived in the only major populated city on this moon that this story takes place on, and they decide that they want to hear crickets. They've never heard crickets before. So they decide they're going to become what's called a tea monk. This tea monk just gets a little cart and they go around from village to village and they just offer tea and advice and comfort to those people who are having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month. So Dex does this, they go out, they start helping people and they start serving the tea, and after a while they realize they're still unfulfilled and they still haven't heard crickets. So they take their tea cart and they go out into the wilderness where people normally don't go, and they encounter a robot. And this story is basically about Dex and this robot Moscav as they go out and search to find those crickets that Dex so desperately craves. In my opinion, this book was all about just finding oneself, finding your purpose, finding what you wanted out of life, and going on a journey to experience that. And really, if anybody's feeling unsatisfied or lost or whatever in their life, absolutely recommend this book. I loved it so much. Next is The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. I had to have at least one by him. I recommended this book a lot on my Instagram page for people who are wanting to get into Brandon Sanderson. It's a great introduction into his work. So this story follows the main character, Shai, who is a forger. In this magic system, basically everything kind of has a soul and it believes something that it wants to be. And Shai can convince this to become something else, and she creates false things, and she kind of has become an art thief and a different type of thief who replaces objects with things that she has forged or created on her own. But she was betrayed and she was captured, and she is now being held in prison. When she is approached and she is offered a deal for her freedom. There was an assassination attempt on the emperor. He was basically killed, but they were able to kind of bring him back to life and restore his body, but his mind is completely gone. His soul is completely empty. And as the balance of power is very precarious in their empire, she is hired to create a soul for the emperor, to use this forge, this magic, to give him an impression of who he once was so that he can function without them losing their figurehead and their control over the empire. She's given a small room to work in where she is constantly under guard and checked up on very regularly while she's working on this forgery for the emperor's soul. She spends her days learning about the emperor, learning everything that she can to give this forgery to make it seem as authentic as possible, all while knowing that they're not actually going to give her freedom at the end, so she is also planning an escape route the entire time. This book had really great character development between the main character and the main elder who comes through and helps her and watches her. And then we have Benty by Nnedi Okorafor, probably one of my favorite short reads from last year. Benty is from Earth, and she is accepted into one of the most prestigious universities in the galaxy. But based on her culture, her family does not want her to leave, and her parents think that she should stay. So she decides to sneak out and to go to this university against her parents' wishes. While she is traveling to the university, her transport is attacked by the Meduse, the alien race that the galaxy has been at war with for a very long time. She survives the initial attack and locks herself into a room trying to survive the attack from these awful warlike creatures. This book was such an amazing sci-fi, and it's not your regular kind of sci-fi epic space opera where it's just all about space battles. This book really is about understanding and communication and overcoming miscommunications and overcoming the difficulties that come with cultural differences and misunderstandings to get to a place of peace. And it is just written so well, and it was beautifully done. I loved Benty. There's 3 more books in this series, and I just want to read them all. The final novella is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. My wife introduced me to this book, and it has become one of my absolute favorites ever since then. I have heard that some people didn't like it, they didn't get it, but I loved it. This book follows Santiago, a young shepherd in Spain who is just really trying to make a living and make a life and earn enough money to maybe get married and settle down. After a strange encounter with a man in a city, he decides that he is going to sell all of his sheep and he is going to go to Africa to pursue his personal destiny. So he sets sail not knowing what to expect or even what to do, but he knows that he is working towards his personal destiny. This book follows a series of encounters of this boy Santiago dealing with different people and how he influences their life and how they influence his, until he eventually comes into contact with the alchemist in an oasis in the middle of the desert, who teaches him more about himself than he ever thought possible. This is the book that convinced me to follow my dreams, specifically one scene where he is having a conversation with his heart, and it hit me so hard, and I just knew that I wanted to be able to follow my heart. And no, things may not always work out, but I know that I tried.